I get questions from time to time about our Mark III. I figured before we tear it apart for a few more upgrades for next season, I'd go through, tell you a little bit of the history of the car, kind of break down the entire spec sheet of it, show you what it takes to build a sport front-wheel drive Volkswagen. So before I actually take the bumper off, the car itself is a 93, 94 Golf CL base model, as base as it can get. It does have a Jetta front end on it, only because I'm not really a fan of the look of these cars, and the Jetta front end at least makes it a little more appealing. The bumper itself is mostly hand-built. The stock upper piece you can kind of see here, that's about all that's left of the stock bumper. All the rest is essentially a sheet of aluminum that we've made some bracing in behind to kind of make the bumper what it is. Helps get the front end out a little bit further and be able to push the intercooler and stuff out further. As you can see at the bottom there, last time we had it off the trailer, I had a little incident and nearly tore the front bumper right off the car, so that's a good time. So yeah, I'm going to take the front bumper off, get the hood open, and we'll go through, tell you a little bit of the car. So you can see the little more of the important stuff now that the front bumper's been removed. The car was built to compete essentially at a true street class based on the World Cup final rule book. We did this mainly because I wanted to compare our times with others throughout Canada and the US, so that we knew that we were making some progress as we went faster. Yeah, we could throw a bigger turbo on it. Yeah, we could cut a whole bunch more weight out of it to try to go faster at our local track. But if we want to actually try to go and compete anywhere, it was good to know where we stood in regards to our times and our mile an hour. And with that being said, the car itself weighs 2440 with me in it, which meets the class rules for the true street class for World Cup finals. It has met the minimum ET for the past 2 years to be able to go and compete there. The quickest ET out of this car so far is a 920. That was at around 700 wheel horsepower. We've actually, just before the last event, we turned the power up a bit, was making right around 800 wheel, 805 or something like that, I think it did. But we were having a lot of issues with the car spinning on the dyno due to the old tires that we were using at the time on it. They weren't the slicks on the dyno, just another set of tires we have. Some of the stuff on the vehicle, it's a typical set of weld 13-inch with bead locks in the front. We got some Spinworks skinnies in the rear. The fenders have been trimmed a little bit to be able to fit the 24.5-inch tire on it. The car itself is mostly stock body-wise. It's all metal. There's no carbon or fiberglass panels on this car. It's all fully glass car, so no Lexan or anything like that for windows. At the back of the car, we do have a custom rear beam in it. Just basically, we were trying to shave a bit of weight out of the back of the car, make the car a little bit lighter. So that's been done. Parachute, of course, we're seeing over 150 miles an hour, so definitely the parachute's required above that. The rear wing is simply a sheet of aluminum that we had bent up and just kind of, went by what few other guys had built in the US, so nothing special there. Simply a sheet of aluminum that we had riveted to the hatch. The rear bumper has some speed holes in it, basically to keep the wind from being trapped in behind there and slowing us down. The the spare tire well has been taken out and just a sheet of aluminum put over that. I'd open the hatch. It's a little hard to do with one hand in the camera in my hand. So kill switch in the rear. For the sport front-wheel drive true street class at World Cup, this car needs to weigh 2,400 pounds. Well, there's actually some handicaps now that we're able to be lighter, but this car with me in it in its current state weighs 2,440. so we're within the weight range, and we haven't cut much out of this car, to be honest. It's mostly stock stuff with a few things. Like I said, the rear beam, inside the car, it still has a dash, still has stock door panels, still has carpet in the car, has a Kirky aluminum seat with a 5-point harness, stock steering wheel, few switches for lights, slipper, burnout switch, usually right up here where you can kind of see some Velcro. I usually put a little tablet so I can make some changes in the staging lanes if I feel the need. Next up is the KDN Shifter. This shifter we've had a lot of involvement with the development of. Dave, the owner of KDN, is a good buddy of mine, and we really pushed to try to make this really user-friendly and decent option for us drag racing these cars. So with this shifter, it's going to be hard for me to kind of show you all at once, but on this version anyways, I have a micro switch shift knob so that it will tell the ECU to cut ignition when I'm going to shift. It also has a lockout version so that once you engage the lockout, you can't put the car, once you shift at a first, it won't go back into first. Once you shift at a second, it won't go back into second. So it essentially forces you to go back up or go into third, then down into fourth. So it really helps prevent money shifting and wrecking basically everything you got all your money into. There hasn't been a really solid option up until this point. There are a few other lockouts, but they're not quite as in depth as what's involved with this shifter. So yeah, stock cluster. As you can see, I've ditched all the stuff in behind the dash. There's not much in there. Shift light, pretty basic stuff for drag racing. So moving up to the front, where all the magic happens really. This setup is a little bit of an oddball setup compared to what most guys run. It is using a 16 valve head, 2-liter 16 valve head off of an older Passat or an older GTI, mostly in the Mark II platform. We are using a newer bottom end, so the same bottom end that would be in, say, a 1.8 turbo. The reason we did that is because the older blocks weren't as strong and they were also becoming a lot harder to find. So the newer block, we can find those, you know, within minutes, and they cost basically nothing. We got a weight plate in the front, which has all been, you know, custom built. Batteries there. All this stuff I built by hand. The intercooler was a Garrett core, 1,000 horsepower core. I had some end tanks, welded those on. The intake manifold is a K series. Sorry, the plenum for the intake manifold is from a K series, Skunk 2. I think it's their Pro or Ultra Pro series. We wanted to put the throttle body in the center on this vehicle, so I went ahead and bought that, just the plenum, and then built the rest of it. The fuel cell, as you can see, is in the front. I built that. It's got a little gauge on it to tell us when it's full. Catch can's pretty small for this setup. I've been meaning to build a new one for a long time, but we have it draining back into the pan, so I'm not too worried about it. Air motor fuel pressure regulator, 2200 cc injectors. It runs on ethanol. It's a 6775 precision on this car. I built a full tubular exhaust manifold. This is all custom built, obviously. All the exhaust, what's there for the exhaust, 4-inch up pipe with the wastegate screamer pipe as well. It's got a tile blow-off valve and wastegate. It's got a CSR Radiator and Spal Fan. This is a very common, this is actually sold for a lot of the front-wheel drive Hondas. We're basically, you know, using what works on those vehicles and trying to incorporate them in this thing. 90 mil throttle body. I think I mentioned 2200cc injectors, 2 air motive pumps in the fuel cell. They're built right in. They're kind of hard to see, but they're side by side using an IE fuel plate that they use on their surge tanks. I essentially built everything into the fuel cell itself. So for fuel management, we run a VEMS ECU. I actually didn't show you, but it's just mounted up under the dash there. The harness was built by Kevin Black at Lugtronic. Essentially the whole ECU harness package was supplied by him. The man knows his stuff when it comes to getting cars down the track, that's for sure. We do see a little bit of a need for an upgrade, but I think we're going to be able to go plenty fast. Guys have gone a lot faster than us with that setup, so we may upgrade down the road, but at this point, this ECU package is doing everything that we need. For suspension, it's garbage, to be honest. We did our own camber plates up front, just some generic cheap coilovers with some upgraded heavier springs in the rear. We got some traction bars up front just to kind of keep the control arms in place. A little more about the engine itself. Again, it's a 2-liter 16-valve head. It's got a newer style 06X block. In this setup, we're using a set of Boostline Rods, JE Pistons. It has a set of Techtonic cams, valve springs, upgraded valves, all the regular stuff to try to make some horsepower with. We got a 4-speed dog box. This current setup, I think mile an hour wise, at about 8,700, it'll get us to 175 mile an hour, something like that, maybe a little more. I can't remember the math on it right now, but either way, we haven't seen the limits of the mile an hour out of this gear set yet. I will say that matting up this 16-valve head to the newer style block, which is what I do get a lot of questions about, it isn't substantially hard to do. You just need to find the right mix match of parts to get there. If anybody has any questions about that, obviously we can supply all the info and even the parts to help you do that. To my knowledge, this hybrid block and head combo, I think we're one of the only few to make this kind of power out of this setup. So although the bottom end is proven to make over 1,000 horsepower with a few of the other guys, so we'll hopefully get there. We just got a few more things to upgrade and work through in order to be able to keep her together. So that's the overall spec sheet of the vehicle. I know there's tons of stuff that I'm missing, but we'd be here forever if I continued on with all the little things that we've changed and modified on it. For the most part, it's a pretty basic Golf with a decent power plant. Although we've met the minimum ET to compete at World Cup Final the last 2 years, this car is definitely not ready to compete at that level. It's close, but we need to get a little bit quicker with it and sort out a few more things and obviously bring more power to the table. It does make decent power now, but the guys are going really fast in this class. So the goals for this car, 8 seconds for sure is where we want to be. We're not far off with the power that we have. It should be easily obtainable based on the current setup, but we're going to have to wait till next year to get that. If you guys have any questions or anything, just drop a question or a comment in the comment section below, and I'll do my best to answer. Thanks.